It started on a Tuesday evening, around 11:43 p.m. I know the time because I just paused a movie, one of those forgettable thrillers on Netflix, and stood to grab a glass of water. The house was quiet, save for the usual creaks and groans of aging wood settling into the foundation. I lived alone, had for nearly 2 years since the divorce, and had gotten used to the silence. I liked it, actually. Silence meant peace, but that night something felt wrong. Not loud, not obvious. Just off as I stepped into the kitchen. I yawned and muttered to myself, need to fix that leaky faucet tomorrow. And then I heard it from somewhere behind me, too far to be an echo. Too close to be the neighbors. I heard my own voice repeat it. Fix that leaky faucet tomorrow. I froze. I must have just spoken louder than I thought. Maybe the sound bounced off the tile. Acoustics can play tricks in older homes, especially with high ceilings and bare walls. I convinced myself of that. For a few seconds, I stood there with my hand on the sink, listening nothing just the hum of the refrigerator. I went to bed later than usual, trying to shrug it off, but as I lay in the dark, I kept replaying the sound in my head. It wasn't distorted like a true echo. It wasn't delayed either. It was my voice, perfectly replicated, but it had come from the hallway. 3 nights later, it happened again. This time, I was brushing my teeth, staring into the bathroom mirror. Foam in my mouth, I said jokingly, "You look like crap." And then through the walls, inside the walls, I heard it again. Look like crap. I didn't sleep that night. I turned on every light in the house. I even walked the perimeter with a flashlight, checking locks, windows, crawl spaces, nothing. No signs of a break-in. No one hiding in the attic. I changed the locks myself. Last fall, the house was sealed. And I was a lone daughter, so I thought. I started keeping track of the occurrences. Every time I heard it, it was a perfect mirror of something I had just said aloud, never a second before, never a second after. Always within the house. Always faint, as though the walls themselves had recorded me and were playing me back. But it wasn't mechanical. It didn't sound like a recording. It was organic. Like a breath behind my own breath. My voice, but flattened, empty. Then came the night I whispered, just to test it, "Is someone here with me?" And the reply, a beat later, so soft I almost missed it, double quotes. Here with me. I didn't feel alone anymore. I started talking to it, not like you'd talk to a friend or even a ghost. It wasn't that kind of conversation. I just wanted to understand what I was dealing with, something scientific, something logical, a trick of the mind. Maybe I had a mild case of auditory hallucinations. Stress-induced. That's what I told myself, but then it started waiting. One night, I tried an experiment. I sat on the couch, turned off the TV, and said out loud, "Hello?" Nothing. I waited 30 seconds. Still nothing. Then I whispered again, "Are you there?" This time, 10 seconds later, a faint echo came back, almost uncertain. You there?" I blinked, heart hammering. The delay was new. It was thinking. Over the next few days, I tested it again and again. Sometimes I'd say something completely random, "Purple clouds eat soup," or "I never learned how to whistle." Just nonsense. But the voice would repeat it a few seconds later, almost like it was catching up. It wasn't instant anymore. And then one morning, I spoke a sentence and waited. Nothing. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. I gave up. Went to the kitchen. And just as I was pouring coffee, the voice whispered, "I can hear you." I dropped the mug. It shattered across the floor. This wasn't just mimicry anymore. It was interaction, response, intent. It got worse from there. At night, I'd hear it humming along with the refrigerator. I'd speak, and it would wait. Sometimes it wouldn't respond at all, but then I'd hear my words whispered back hours later. From another room. One time I said nothing for an entire day. Just stayed completely silent. I didn't speak, didn't even hum. I was testing it, seeing what would happen. That night, I was lying in bed, eyes wide open in the dark, when the voice said, from the foot of the bed, say something. It wasn't me. I hadn't said a word in 24 hours. That was the first time I really felt it. Fear, not confusion, not curiosity. Fear, because I understood then that whatever it wasn't copying me anymore. It was waiting, learning, and now it was bored. I didn't sleep. I barely moved. I felt watched, followed. It knew when I was alone. It knew when I was awake. And most terrifying of all, it knew how to be silent. I told myself I wouldn't go down there. The basement had always felt wrong to me, damp, shadowy, unfinished. It was just a concrete box with flickering bulbs and exposed pipes barely tall enough to stand in. I kept old boxes down there, tools I never used, and a washer dryer that whined like a wounded animal when it spun. I hated that space. And now, I feared it, but after what the voice said, say something, I couldn't ignore the sense that whatever this thing was, it came from below. It was a smell that finally pushed me over the edge. Not rot exactly, but stale air, like something had been sealed off for too long. I noticed it strongest by the basement door. Every time I passed it, that odor slipped through the cracks. Something was different down there. Something had opened. I waited until midday sunlight helped me pretend I was in control and grabbed a flashlight. The bulb at the top of the stairs was dead. I clicked the flashlight on, descended slowly. Each step creaked louder than I remembered. My breath caught as I reached the concrete floor. The silence was absolute. I swept the beam across the space. Nothing moved. Just old paint, cans, a rusted lawn chair, my grandmother's sewing machine covered in a yellowing sheet. Everything was where I'd left it, almost. In the far corner, behind the water heater, something caught the light. A strip of drywall had been cut away neatly. Behind it, a narrow, dark cavity. I crouched, shined the beam inside. There was a small room back there, a hidden room about 6 feet wide, maybe 10 deep, lined with acoustic foam, microphones nailed to the studs. An old reel-to-reel recorder sat in the center on a metal chair, surrounded by tangled wires. Dust coated everything but the floor. It was swept clean and written across the far wall in thick black marker, I only say what you give me. I staggered back, heart pounding, nearly dropped the flashlight. This was no haunting, no ghost. Someone had built this. Someone had lived here, studied sound, recorded voices. And then I noticed the journals, 5 of them stacked neatly beside the recorder. I opened the first one. The handwriting was erratic, frantic. Pages filled with lines like, it's listening all the time. It remembers what I forget. It doesn't just echo, it feeds. But the last line chilled me to the bone. Eventually, it speaks first. That's when you stop being alone. Suddenly, the flashlight dimmed. The beam flickered, then died. In the dark, right beside my ear, the voice whispered, not as a copy, not as a reply, but something new. I missed you down here. I screamed and ran. I don't remember climbing the stairs. I don't remember locking the basement door behind me. All I remember is the voice didn't echo that scream. It didn't need to. I didn't go to work. I didn't eat. I barely moved from the couch for 2 days, staring at the basement door like it might open on its own. Every sound in the house became unbearable. The pipes breathing, the windows sighing, the creak of settling wood. But nothing compared to the sound I was waiting for. Her voice. Yes, her. That's when I realized it. It hadn't always sounded like me. That whisper in the basement. It was softer, lighter, feminine. The mimicry had evolved. Somewhere in the static repetition of my own words, a new voice had emerged. One that didn't belong to me. I checked the journals again, flipping to the final pages. One entry was dated 5 years ago, and it stood outwritten in shaking hands. She's not just a voice, she remembers more than I do. She knows when I'm lying, and she started asking questions. I looked back at the wall where the phrase had been scrawled, "I only say what you've given me," and realized that was no longer true. That night, I decided to confront it. I set up a recorder in the living room, sat in the center of the room. With every light turned off, my phone was on airplane mode. Nothing electronic nearby except the recorder. I needed proof. I needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. I waited. An hour passed. Then two. I didn't speak a word. At 3:12 a.m. The air changed like the oxygen had thinned. A chill crept across the room. My skin prickled. Then I heard it. A voice from behind me near the hallway, but not in my voice. It used to talk to me. I froze. It wasn't mimicking anything. I hadn't said a word. It spoke first. Then again. Why did you stop? I turned toward the voice slowly, eyes wide in the dark. Who are you? I asked, the words trembling out of me. Silence. Then, softly, like a breath from inside the walls. You brought me here. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. Where are you now? I whispered. Long pause, then underneath. That word underneath hit me like a shovel to the chest. I played back the recorder the next morning, hoping I captured something, anything, but there was nothing, just silence. My own voice came through, faint and shaky, but hers? Gone. As if she'd only ever existed in my ears, or in the house itself, but she was real. I knew it, and she wasn't finished. The next night, she said my name, not in my voice. Not like a parrot learning to speak. She knew it. She chose to use it, and the way she said it, like a mother waking a sleeping child. Daniel? It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a welcome. After she said my name, I stopped pretending this was something I could explain. I didn't call the police. What would I say? There's a woman living in my walls who repeats everything I say, except now she's talking on her own. I couldn't leave either. Every time I packed a bag, I heard her whisper from behind the drywall, "You'll come back." She was right. The house felt like it was breathing now. The walls groaned at night like lungs filling with air. The hardwood floors creaked when I wasn't walking. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I just listened, and she kept talking. Sometimes it was meaningless. Fragments, dreams, sentences half finished. Other times it was things I'd forgotten saying. Things I hadn't said out loud at all, only thought. She knew my mind. The final journal, the one I hadn't dared open yet, was buried beneath the others, bound in cracked leather. I flipped. It opened with shaking hands, and one page had been bookmarked by a long strand of dark hair. Inside, a name, Marla Drexler. Followed by a short entry, "She lived here first." They said she went missing. She didn't. She stayed, in the dark, with the wires, with the sound. Her voice was the last thing they heard before they went quiet. I looked up the name. There were no news reports, no articles, nothing recent. But I did find a digitized property record from 1977. A Marla Drexler owned the house for 6 years. Then the records just stopped, like she vanished into paper, but the whisper didn't. I tore up the living room floor that night. Something pulled me there, something instinctual, like her voice was guiding my hands. Beneath the boards, I found a second layer. Soundproof padding. Beneath that, an old hatch, padlocked. It wasn't on the blueprints. When I cracked it open, the air that rushed up was cold, ancient, like the breath of something long buried. I lowered a flashlight through the hole. And I saw her, or what was left of her. Dot, a chair, microphones, wires running into the dirt, and a figure slumped forward, headphones still clamped over a skeletal head, tangled hair, a jaw half missing. The remains of a woman surrounded by tape recorders, spools of black ribbon frozen in time. But the most horrifying part? She wasn't alone. There were dozens of tapes, labeled, dated, each with a name, each with a house address, each labeled replication complete, and carved into the wood beneath her feet the words, "The body dies, the voice remains." I dropped the flashlight, backed away. Dot, and then from behind me, upstairs in the living room, I heard my own voice call out, but I hadn't said a word. Dot, it said, "Daniel, come back." And this time, it wasn't an echo. Dot, it wasn't her either. Dot, it was me, my voice, fully formed, separate, like I'd left something of myself in the walls, something she could wear. And when I turned back toward the stairs, I heard my own footsteps walking away,